Welcome to another Rooster Talk, and we've got Venture Minerals Limited here today talking to us about their recent release, and it's all about rare earth elements. Venture Minerals Limited code is VMS. Market cap as we speak is 40 million, and the share price is around 2.5 cents, which is a lot better than our last coffee with Samso, Andrew.
Absolutely.
So, Andrew, rare earths, venture, something new. Tell us about it.
Well, look, we've got a lot of critical minerals or decarbonisation minerals within our portfolio, and at Mount Lindsay, obviously with our tin tungsten project there, we've come across some rare earths within Mount Lindsay itself, and again, we haven't been looking specifically for projects, but we've come up with a couple of targets down there. That's reward, so we're sitting clay-hosted rare earths sitting around our tin-rich zones. So that kind of got us intrigued. And then we found at Cruncher in a parallel host rock, only about 1.3 kilometres away from reward, we were getting lanthanum and cerium anomaly, which normally everyone assays for anyway when you do chemical suite. So we didn't do any of the other elements. Coincidental with a boron, which is a good indicator of tin in the Mount Lindsay area. So that Cruncher target, we've drilled that. So that kind of got us into the rare earth space. But then the other one we hit last year, again, it was another rare earth anomaly sitting or target sitting within a project we already had, was the one at Golden Grove North, which is our Vulcan prospect with a 12.5% total rare earth, which is 125,000 ppm. So a big number. So we're preparing to go and test some drilling there. But that got us thinking about, we're more interested, I suppose, in the clay-hosted rare earths, and two, was there any other opportunities around? Hence the update we put out to the market about 4 new targets within WA.
Okay, and I mean, when we look at your announcement, you've got basically 2 new projects, and one is something that you had before, which is Coolan, and obviously now you're finding more data set as you do things. Can you go through us, Brothers and Bandy and Coolan in sort of in that order?
Yeah, look, Brothers and Bandy probably emerged out of the same data set. Back in I think it's 2007. We had the Geological Survey, did some laterite sampling on the West Yilgarn area, and they've done this in various areas. It's quite common, and this is a public data set. And it didn't have all the rare earths; had about half of them, about 7 of 14 in there. So we had a look at that data set, and we found a couple of peak high values. In this case, the highest, which was Bandy, and the third highest, which was at Brothers in that data set, and lo and behold, Brothers is sitting as close as 7.5 kilometres away from our Golden Grove North project, or where the Vulcan prospect is. Mm-hmm. So it's close to that. The geology is different, but the sort of the key component for that sort of 500 square kilometres we pegged in that area is that somebody had done a co-funded drill hole testing a rare earth target, carbonatite, more of your hard rock sort of scenario, and they didn't get the carbonatite, but they got 4 metres at 2100 ppm total rare earths in saprolite or clay, and we thought, well, that's a few things are starting to gel together here. So we pegged or applied for that position. Most of those tenements are granted, so next phase is to prepare for drilling there. So using that theme of the same data set, we applied that to our Bandy project, and the highest value of 2700 ppm opposed to the 1900 at Brothers sits in that area. And so we've pegged around about I think it's 800 odd square kilometres in that area. This is the peak values I'm talking about, but it's supporting higher grade values. So it is, if you look at the maps there, you'll see that we've pegged not just the peak value, but one's also higher value, seen amongst higher values in the area. So we've done the same thing at Bandy as we did at Brothers. So that gave us a good position. Again, most of the tenements are granted. We're waiting for I think the last one's coming not too far away, and we're preparing for that sort of reconnaissance air core type drilling. And we're drilling clay, so reasonably short, inexpensive drilling to test the concept. And certainly, we're looking to deliver a new ionic clay discovery in either of those projects. In the meantime, back to finding rare earths within other projects we've already got. Hence the Coolum project. We flew an airborne EM survey, and in the airborne EM survey you can see things like clay hosted anomalies usually in the higher channels, and get some indicators. So we've come up with, in the northern area and then in the southern area, Coolum. Remember, Coolum's 600 square kilometres, but we've come up with some coincidental conductivity anomalies with some anomalous lanthanum and cerium in the case of the north, or just lanthanum in the case of the south, with a mixture of our data sets and previous data sets there. So we're getting some coincidental anomalies, and again, they will need follow-up with air core drilling. So, and that's spread over several kilometres. So it's very broad, early day work. So we need to get that drill bit on the ground, put some holes and get some old farming tracks, make it a bit easier to get access to, and hopefully, present the results of those programs in the coming months.
We've had a lot of guys come onto Samso talking about rare earths and clay rare earths, and obviously EM is one of the tools that they talk widely about. Do you see that coming into play with your Bandy and Brothers project? Or because obviously your band is quite close to a salt lake, is that going to be a problem, or do you not think so?
Look, in terms of the EM, you could look at things like squid potentially. We're probably leaning towards in those cases about, you've got surface anomalism. You really, I think, want to try to get down and do that first pass reconnaissance program. And look, we could fly the EM at Brothers work quite well, but in this case, probably the cost of a reconnaissance aircraft program will deliver you better data, and if that starts to gel and you're trying to work out where the mineralisation is, then maybe go with the EM. So the EM done at Coolum, for example, is done not just for rare earth clays, or it's also looking at potential sulfide targets, as Coolum's not only just got this rare earth arm to it, it's also gold and nickel copper PGE, and even we had a bit of validation from our friends at Sultan with that nickel, I suppose, identifying an ultramafic belt not too far. They call it Coolum Hill, their project. That's virtually next door. So there's still that side of the things, but we thought aircore, reasonably cheap reconnaissance style drilling, give you a bit of a lay of the land, how much cover there is the clay, and like those holes drilled in that co-funding were only 60 metres deep, so reasonably cost effective. And what we're finding is that drill rigs in the aircore space are a lot easier to get than in the RC and diamond. That's kind of the sort of pressure's kind of let off a little bit, so I think we can get out there quite quickly at particularly Brothers and Bandy, to do that drilling, maybe even starting as early as next month.
Okay. I mean, going back to the fact that a lot of guys have been coming to Samso showcasing their story, I kind of get the gist that maybe the clay rare earth story's got a dark horse advantage over the hard rock stuff. I'm not saying that hard rock is no good. I'm just saying maybe it's because it's so new to our industry, clay rare earths and things like that. What do you think of that kind of narrative?
Well, a couple of things, I suppose, when we look at a carbonatite or monazite hosted, the things, and that's been more your traditional sort of rare earth sources. It could be either in mineral sands or the these sort of intrusives. Before, that's Mount Weld's a classic, but Mount Weld's interesting as in it's mining the wetted version initially before it gets down to the harder rock carbonatite, and that tends to be higher in those sort of magnet rare earths, if you like, those 4 key elements that go into your permanent magnets. So it tends to be a higher ratio in the clays. And the other thing is that the radioactivity is significantly less is less of an issue. So there's a couple of advantages there, and obviously that's been China's been ahead of the curve in terms of the rare earth clay hosted rare earths. So that's kind of what our thought processes are, and obviously that's everyone's been focusing on that issue. Is the processing simpler? Probably I don't know the answer to that just yet myself, but the processing is complicated. But again, if you're going to process, we're processing 14 elements when some are worth $1 or $2 a kilo versus hundreds of dollars a kilo or thousands of dollars a kilo. You want to be focused on getting those elements out. So, but first things first. Let's make a discovery and then see the size of that and work it. But we believe it has those distinct advantages. Closer to surface, all those sort of things.
I guess a lot of people would be thinking, you've got a big portfolio. How do you plan to manage this without it being, a distraction from other bigger pictures?
Well, look, that's Venture's a very diversified company, and some of that's by design, some of it's by a need, a requirement to do that, to keep I suppose the interest in the stock. It's good being badged as a tin focused company, for example, and but you compare Venture against the tin focused companies, and our market cap is better as a consequence. So it's not being a one trick pony, which we've often spoken about before, and when you think about tin focus, look at our tin asset, our flagship asset, Mount Lindsay. It's tin, it's tungsten, it's magnetite. Now we've got boron. So immediately by definition, it's not really a tin project per se. It's really a tin tungsten project, and the boron, might play its part as we learn more about it. But it's what's really clear in amongst our view, and we picked up all this ground in Western Australia, probably to Golden Grove North, to Cool, and the Southwest project, which Chalice has validated how good a project that is by JVing into it and spending their money on it. That what we're seeing is we're getting a lot of those sort of critical minerals, the part that plays in all this decarbonisation of the world economy as we're trying to get our emissions down, and we're just picking up elements that sort of naturally work together. And like I said, the rare earth stuff was sort of we came across at a reward. We just assayed stuff. We were drilling on a Renison mine sequence. We found this strange mineral. We zapped it with a handheld XRF machine, and we're getting rare earth numbers. It wasn't by design, more so. But when we looked at the rare earth space, we started thinking, well, the ionic clay rare earths is where we want to be. Well documented about the rare earths and need for those electric motors in the turbines, in the cars. Boron's part of that thematic as well. But the rare earths are the main part of that. And when you think about rare earths, you think about China dominates the market, and then we got, well, tungsten's the same. Tungsten's sometimes been described as a rare earth. So we kind of figure it's in a space that's it's a bit of an adjunct to what we've already got, but it's not a big leap. And by doing things that are relatively cost effective, like picking a few tenements up, cheap, 100% owned, get an air core rig, and you'll know very, very quickly. Checking on projects you already own, well, by definition, that's already quite cost effective. And if you've got a good project, got a lot of mineralisation, clearly that there's the right ingredients, like Golden Grove North is a good example. So is Mount Lindsay, where you've already got a lot of mineralisation there. You're in the right spot. But sometimes, and a lot of these world-class projects, and Campbell's a great example, everyone focused on nickel there, but it was, look at the amount of gold there's half a Kalgoorlie already in terms of gold, that you'll often find, maybe in a different rock, you'll find enrichment of other minerals because all the conditions for mineralisation are already there, and different elements may precipitate out in different host rocks because they've got different chemical properties, and that's don't sometimes you can't work out it. Julimar is a great example. You can't work out why things are there, and you find it, and then you kind of, the geologist works out later, and it comes up with this new ore body. All of a sudden, there's a Julimar style mineralisation. That's another example. Well, the rare earths we've got at Vulcan, is there a carbonate? Is there intrusive deep down below? We don't know the answer to that. As explorationists, we've got to go and drill holes to find out, and we find it out later, and there's a new, there's a carbonatite sitting in the system, or there's a different style of rare earth mineralisation, then it's a great result. If it's high grade, grade's obviously a big component. You're going to get some of these clay hosted projects can't be big tons, but the grade's quite modest in size, in modest grades, but it's got to be a lot bit about that heavy rare earths. It still comes down to economics, but I think in the world we're going through at the moment with reducing our carbon emissions, these critical minerals, for us it's I think it's just a natural progression for the company. If we find an asset that is starting to fight for the same funds that Mount Lindsay demands, then we've got enough assets to spin out into another company, and that's we don't have that scenario at the moment, unless Charles make a discovery down the southwest, or we find something on Coolin or Golden Grove, then yes, but we're always keeping our eyes wide open opportunity. That's always been Venture's strength, and will continue to be. And if we make another discovery, like I said, it's parallel or battles for that dollar with Mount Lindsay, then we could split the company up quite easily at that point.
I mean, when we had the coffee at Samso, I wrote that, I sort of reinforced that thought from the moment, the first conversation we had, as I say, in mid-2020 or late 2020. I think I coined it a diversified, dedicated mineral explorer or something like that. Because the projects I see had its own merits, right? It's going to carry. And now I'm seeing what you guys are doing. I kind of think that you guys are already in that decarbonised strategy, decarbonised metal company. And with Mount Lindsay, that the issues, a lot of people don't think about it. It's not a one-trick pony. It's a mineral system. It's a mineral province. I said it was the Mount Lindsay mineral province, because the fact that you've got those metals that you're talking about, that means the system has to be there good enough to produce that. Otherwise, you are a one-trick pony in many ways. And I think that's where I kind of see where you guys are at. So going forward, in terms of your strategy, how do you see? I know you've touched on a bit of that, but how do you see that? Because shareholders and potential investors are saying, "Well, which one are you?" And that's a good and bad thing, right? As we've said, it's a good and bad thing. And I know it's all about mitigating risk. I'm all for that. I mean, I'm in the same position as you now. It's all about mitigating risk, right? Shareholders just want success, and we're like, okay, if this one doesn't work, then what do we do next? Yeah. So how do you see that strategy? I mean, we are in a decarbonising world. We are in a no emission, new EV style, whatever you like to call it. That's the path, right? There's no turning back. How do you see you guys fitting in that picture?
Well, look, the lithium's an obvious thing. Everyone's, we do what we can to improve shareholder value. And we've had a look for lithium, and we can't find it now. But the project we picked up is the rare earth. So for us, we like to give shareholders. If you find something, it's a good problem to have. What do I do with it? I've found. I found a nickel deposit in Tasmania, or we found a nickel deposit in WA, or gold deposit, or it's a good problem to have, and we think that obviously managing and prioritising those things is constantly in front of our mind. Where does that exploration dollar go? Does it go to Mount Lindsay? which is the flagship asset? Does it go to Coolant? Does it go to Golden Grove? Does it go now to the rare earth? That's always the question that we're faced with. And when our market was $200 million, people were coming up to our booth in Sydney. We will be back there again, and that's only 2 years ago. And they were going, okay, the Chalice joint venture. So we picked up that ground, 100%, and all of a sudden, a few years down the track, Chalice are JVing into it, and that's a big chunk of our market cap. The tin price was going up. The iron ore price is over $200. We haven't even spoken about Riley. That's sitting there. If the cyclone had hit Port Hedland, which it didn't, but if it did and the price is $200, we just turn that on. So you've got that option value available. And I think most people like it. They do want us to focus, and everyone's going to have their own badge. You can say, I like what you're doing on the rare earths. I like what you're doing on the boron. Now adding value to Mount Lindsay. We like that. So there's a lot there for everyone. They also say, I like the fact that you've got so many options, so they stay. Because you look at our track record for over 15 years, and somehow a genie comes out of the bottle and something materialises. Either it's because the market's changed, you're actively exploring, you're finding, it would have been great to have some lithium. No one saw a tenfold price increase. If that happened to tin, we saw the issues in Myanmar today, very volatile metal. We're well positioned. We've got a big chunk of tin. And now with the borate story, tin boron story, you could have a lot more, which we just haven't looked for, or focused on, should I say. So that's what I think people like. Who knows, with the Ukraine war, the tungsten price may go up 10 times. These things are now, the whole world used to be quite stable. Now it's quite volatile, hence there's a lot of opportunity. And we provide that. I won't talk ill about tin-focused companies, but they are focused on tin, or they're focused on tungsten's a much harder business. Or they have to wait for that price to go up. They're sitting there waiting, right time to build. But if you can, add more elements or find a discovery of a different commodity next to it, then you've always got giving venture or the company the best chance and its shareholders of reaping success rather than waiting for the market to turn.
I think that's a very good point you make, and that's what I like. We've sort of been talking, right? People say, "Oh, of course you guys are going to say this because you're doing a promotional video." But think about it: is that what you're saying is, instead of being focusing on one element, and it costs you X, Y, Z, but if you have a suite of credits to do that, your cost drops, and then suddenly something that's mediocre becomes mineable. Like there are many examples. Cadia is a classic example. There's credits. There's lots of stuff in South America where it's a big porphyry, but the credits makes it possible.
What about one of the greatest, or biggest deposits is, Olympic Dam?
Yeah, well, that's right.
How many credits there?
Yeah.
Everyone forgets about it. It's actually producing uranium.
Well, a lot of people forget that when Olympic Dam was discovered, copper price was the lowest it ever was. So it was all the other credits that make it what it is today. And I think that's a very important point, right? That's why I coined Mount Lindsay as a problem, because you cannot have a mineral system that's small and not fertile if you've got all these other metals popping up, like your iron ore and then you got your tin, you got your tungsten, and now you got your boron, and I do allude everyone to look at your massive ultramafic belt that you've got there that you haven't even have touched in some ways. Who knows what that could come up with, right?
Yeah, well, you got the Meredith Range sitting there, massive granite coming through and ripping the guts out of the system, heating, reacting anything, and around these granites is where you get these mineralised deposits.
Yep.
And so if you look on the map of Tasmania, there'll be Savage River up here, magnetite, potentially an ISCG type of. They're still debating that, whether it's a skarn or whatever. You've got the Cleveland tin mine here,
yes.
Tin with indium. Let's not. That's tin and copper and tungsten, and then you got Helia, and then you got Mount Lindsay. And the same granite source as Renison is actually, been proven by seismic, is joined at depth. There's a lot happening there. And you've got this ultramafic belt ripping up towards it. There's going to be, a cracking discovery there. We probably haven't come across, maybe we're still playing around the edges. We just don't know. But we've focused on the stuff that's low cost, trying to find something. We found something, we're understanding it, and to extract the full value of it. But, in this skarn type deposits, you might have something proximal, something distal. So like you might have, and Nuevo Corvus in Portugal is a good example. They've got a tin zinc skarn next to, I think, a base metal skarn, but it's a distal one. It's sort of, so where you are in the system, you might have tin tungsten here, and down here you might have silver, zinc, gold further down. It's deeper, so you obviously drilled the stuff that's sticking out the ground first, but there might be other things as well. So, and then all the exposure to all those other skarns, we just haven't had a look. When we bought Mount Lindsay, we didn't buy it, we pegged it. We pegged Mount Lindsay and then put it into venture. We just went back and started drilling underneath the holes Aberfoyle had done and Renison had done. And the exploration is still very much early stage there and pretty exciting. We've had a bit of a bite here at the Waterhouse Skarn, the Big Wilson, Ramsey, which we still haven't got to, Webb's Creek, and there's probably several more skarns we haven't even talked about. And then we're drilling along that Renison mine sequence at the moment, have been putting holes into it. Cruncher, Tasmania's a great location.
And there's also the market, right? The market makes the narrative work, because prior to the EV thing, no one would look for pegmatites, look for lithium. It wasn't a big
pegmatites
thing.
Used to be something which would stope out your gold deposit, or it'd be annoyance more than anything else. And all those big chunks of spodumene, which I didn't recognise in my case, but the pegmatite used to be an annoying thing. They used to cut off the gold deposit in the gold field. So, but all of a sudden it's now becoming a prized position, more valued than the gold deposit itself. So that's the crazy thing that sort of, and who could have predicted that? So if you position yourself with these, good areas of mineralisation, trying to put it too simply, but these hot spots of mineralisation where the activity is, then chances of you yielding in time are much higher. Again, area selection's a key. And so again, we try to provide the opportunity, position ourselves, and through exploration, come up with discoveries. And if you get the timing right in terms of the market, then you're onto a winner. I
mean, apart from the sort of where we are headed as a civilization in terms of electrification of our new world, then you got the geopolitical issue, and the changing face of the Cold War. That kind of narrative can drive demand for commodities as well, as we've seen many times.
Yeah, we may, who knows, certainly the market, the tin and tungsten markets, for example, are open to manipulation because they're quite modest in size, and rare earths as well. If China starts banning rare earths, then where will the world get this rare earth supply from? Will there be a two different markets? Where all of a sudden, it's heading to that Cold War type of scenario, where all of a sudden it's China's got, I don't know where China will get this product supply from the West, but the boron, for example, is not they're not a big boron producer, but they're a big consumer, so they produce that boron carbide, one of the highest strength materials on the planet, and put that into cars. So they actually produce a fair bit of that. So big consumer, borosilicate glass, solar panels, all that sort of stuff. But if all of a sudden there's a war, they start firing at Taiwan, and all of a sudden the US steps in, and everybody wants, and China's not giving us any tungsten to go fire back at them. I don't know what. These are the sort of call it fantasy 5 years ago. Call it now
closer to reality.
Closer to reality. It's
we're not hoping it happens, but if it did.
Oh, we're just trying to be realistic,
Yeah.
but there is, with what's happening in Ukraine and Russia, there's obviously that's happening, and all of a sudden different markets and well-known speaker Friedland, our friend, I think he stood up at I think it was PDAC just recently, and said how much copper was used in brass and in munitions and the rounds and the shells they're using. I talk about tungsten because obviously the armour-piercing component is very important. Copper's bigger marker, but saying how many shells are getting fired, how much we need to go focus on building projects not based on MPV. We just need to build them because that's what China's been doing, and they're ahead of the curve. The way if the prices can just say it's controlled, the tin and tungsten prices or other prices are controlled, and it's not a free market, and you haven't got that supply, then you need to put a different value on it. You need to build these assets. You just need the product. Is that a new market? How do you value that? Because we're still valuing on a free market basis, which is or a transparent market, which clearly, especially on the small end, the critical end, doesn't exist realistically, and that's kind of, how do you build a project like the tin price? I'll go back to the tin price. It's got to be in mid 30s upwards. Otherwise, no tin projects can be built based upon those NPV. Would the bank actually lend you money for a tin project when the volatility is like one day it's 50,000, 6 months later it's 17, and the next day it's 6 months later it's 25 or 28? It's volatile, so it's hard to pin that down. And that tungsten price, likewise, and all these sort of smaller, nichey, usually critical minerals are hard to factor in. But I don't think that's why government's stepped in. Australia's got this critical mineral strategy, lending money, and they'll go, we'll lend money based upon project making money, but at some stage they're going to have to, do our allies, the Americans or the British or the Europeans, say, well, hang on, we want that product. Let's build a project. It's not necessarily about MPVs anymore. It's about needing the product to build your electric vehicles. You're putting them into the shells. NATO's running it. They've spent all its weapons, given them to the Ukraine. Russia's done the same, so there's going to be a big shortage there. So on a geopolitical side, is a very, very strong element, and it may just push aside as Robert Friedland said, push aside that normal, if you like, pre-COVID thinking, which is now becoming almost irrelevant. It's the way we used to think back then. Life was so calm and boring, should I say, almost. You could predict things. Now you can't predict anything. Anyway.
All right, mate. I mean, look, it's a good update, and I think the introduction of rare earths is sort of officially put that tag on for you guys. But I like it. I think it's, I like the fact that you guys are swimming. Most people are swimming towards this decarbonisation kind of process. But look, we have to end with you petting the rooster, and it is the new Rooster Talk thing. You guys have to pet the rooster.
Does he bite?
Sorry?
Does he bite?
Well, it depends where you pet it, I guess.
Good point.
Yeah. So, Andrew, any last words to finish off?
Oh, look, I think we've covered a fair bit. It's, again, like you said, diversification is our strength and sometimes our weakness at the same time. But I always think of it as a strength because I always like to have a backup plan. And we've got lots of backup plans, and now we've got 7 rare earth targets. We didn't have any 9 months ago. So I think the company is happy to be exposed in that space, and I think it gels in very well with all the other commodities that we have.
Yeah. Oh, look, and rare earth is the new sort of play in town. Look, there's many question marks, but I think there's no question in terms of where it could go in terms of importance because of the the fact that the supply needs to be secured for use in future. But mate, let's finish. I'll bring the rooster to you. You can give it a good pet.
Okay.
And
well, my dog always like a bit of a scratch behind the neck, so I think that's very appropriate. Thanks again.
All right then. Thank you.